right, welcome back, guys, to this episode of Relentless. I'm Sandra Weber, your host, owner of Integrative Bodywork by Sandra Weber. I am very excited for today's episode. I love it when I find another practitioner that is as passionate and as educated in their craft as I am.
Thank you.
And
High praise.
I have Alys Faber here with me today, otherwise known as the Stretch Lady.
Yes.
And from what I hear, some people never even really know your name.
Very, very true.
They only know you as the Stretch Lady.
So how I came up with the name is basically I work with a large group of student athletes, and when they're trying to describe what I do, they said, just call the Stretch Lady.
Right.
So I'll get calls from parents all the time, and that's my Instagram and my Facebook.
Yes.
And they'll be like, is this the Stretch Lady? And I say yes, and then I just go with it.
And
I don't
they
even
never
tell them
know
my
your
name.
name.
No.
I love it.
No,
I love it.
It's one of the funniest things ever.
Well, we are going to dive into several topics today, some that will kind of rock the boat with some people in the field and individual general public people that are not familiar with the work that you do or the reason for the work that you do. But before we get into all that, let's just back it up to the beginning.
Awesome.
So in your practice, you, like myself, don't just do one thing.
No.
You take your message of health and wellness to many people, which include on the corporate and executive level and the professional athletes, also into healthcare systems, medical practices, school systems, student athletes, collegiate and professional athletic teams. So you're kind of like the female version of Leonard Wheeler.
Kind of. Yeah. I love that. I love
you have
that
a book
analogy.
out yet?
No, not yet.
So come back when you have your book too.
No,
okay?
I've been asked to do it and I will. So yeah, I've touched a lot of different populations. From the corporate perspective, I've had up to 7 employees, and I've gone into corporations teaching aspects of yoga, meditation, movement, wellness, mindfulness. And then in the healthcare systems, I was asked by Carolina's Healthcare to come in and to create an actual program for allied healthcare professionals to get certified in yoga, to bring yoga into the clinical settings,
Right.
which has been really interesting. And I've been loving watching that grow and bringing all of these pieces in a palatable as well as very light way.
Yes, and that's key. And we're going to get there in a moment.
Yeah, absolutely.
Before we get into all that, let's tell the audience your background, your education, all of the fancy little acronyms after your name.
I know, they're a bunch.
So, and just a reminder, and if you're a client of mine, you know this, what's on paper doesn't always matter. You're going to have your bad massage therapist, your bad PTs, your bad chiros. So, but it also, I do like to preface your content with the fact that you have gotten your education. You have committed that time. Yeah. You're not just a weekend course and let me throw some stuff out there type person.
Yeah, we could talk about that all day long.
We can talk about that in just a few moments.
That's tough.
Absolutely, because it is important.
Very.
So let's tell everyone that's listening what your background is, your education that you have.
So I've been teaching yoga and movement and mindfulness for the past 15 years. So in that field, it's required that you get a Yoga Alliance certification. So I've done that. And then once you get a certain number of hours, you can become a professional in the industry, and then after that you become an educator. So I have all of those certifications, and all those are on my website at thestretchlady.com. You can take a look at all of them. Yeah. And then secondarily, I believe so much in the mind that I went ahead and got certified as a life coach. So then I have 2 certifications in that as well. And I also went to school for communications, English, and political science. So I've got my bachelor's degree in all of those, which has helped me to be a better communicator, because communicating the type of work that I do is challenging because it's so interconnected. Yes. And then many years ago when I began, I also got my personal training certification. So I wanted to understand all the pieces. And when I first began, there was nobody doing anything related to specialty populations. So during that period of time, and I don't even advertise this anymore, I went ahead and got several certifications in perinatal fitness and prenatal yoga. And I was on the board for Yoga Alliance, their very first board for that, and helped to come up with the standards that are now part of that international organization. Awesome. Which is really cool. So working with specialty populations has been something that's been really, really enjoyable for me.
So again, I bring you the expert in the industry. You are welcome.
Thank you.
No, awesome. It's so important to me because people can get hurt, just like with massage and body work.
Yes.
You can end up leaving an office worse than when you came in. So it's very important to me. I don't refer people out to another practitioner unless I know they know their stuff.
Absolutely.
So that's why you're here.
Thank you.
Because I believe in what you're doing, and I know that you have the education to back up what you're presenting to people in the treatment room.
Absolutely. Thank you.
So I guess the first thing I want to deal with is the misconception of what yoga is.
Oh boy.
Being here, and I know we're just going to handle this right off the bat.
Let's just get it on the table. Yes.
Especially being in the South, and I come from a very strong Christian background, great people, great moral philosophies, and all that kind of good stuff. But some people have a very negative slant towards yoga. Mm-hmm.
And I understand why.
Right. And warranted.
Very warranted.
In some capacities,
very
absolutely. Mm-hmm. But some people just have an immediate knee-jerk no to yoga.
Absolutely.
And I have a knee-jerk reaction to yoga as well sometimes because people don't need it. But we'll talk about that in a minute as well.
Yes.
But when it comes to yoga as a religious practice, that's what a lot of people think it is.
Oh, yeah.
And that's all it is.
Yeah.
So talk to us a little bit about that side of it,
sure.
How you implement it, and what your clients expect.
So the key is understanding the historical aspects of it. Mm-hmm. So yoga came from India over 5,000 years ago.
Right.
And the people that practiced it were men. Mm-hmm. And these men were known as ascetics, and they gave up their entire lives to seek the ultimate goal of yoga, because there are these 8 limbs. Mm-hmm. And the ultimate goal is something called samadhi. Mm-hmm. And samadhi is literally, the definition is nirvana, where the subject and object become one. Mm-hmm. So I can describe that to an athlete or a CEO or anyone as when you've been doing something and you're so engaged that you become it. Mm-hmm. Imagine living your entire life like that. It's a pretty nice way to live. Mm-hmm. So that's the goal of yoga. So these men did that. And what happened was it became a practice. Mm-hmm. And that practice started to trickle down. And there was a person by the name of Patanjali who supposedly brought it to the United States, codified it. Mm-hmm. So he put 8 limbs on it, which include ways to eat, ways to live, ways to think. And these are very, very similar to the 10 Commandments. Uh-huh. So that was the baseline. Mm-hmm. When yoga became a physical practice, it changed and it morphed. Mm-hmm. And it went from the etchings inside of a cave of the shapes of animals and warriors to fast forward what we know today.
Right.
Name brand yoga clothes.
Right.
Women and men practicing 5 to 7 days a week, which they do not need. We're going to talk about that in a second.
We will.
And it's become a form of exercise. Mm-hmm. Heated rooms. It was hot in India. That's why it was hot yoga.
Right.
This is falsified.
Out of necessity.
Yes, and the problem is that those joints become, as you know, too loose and lax, and people injure themselves. Yes. And I taught hot yoga when I first started teaching, and I had people injure themselves all the time. Mm-hmm. And so the religiosity behind it is, yes, it's steeped in Hinduism. Mm-hmm. And if you're going to really practice yoga in its true form, that is the road. And when you become a yoga teacher, those are the things that you learn. Mm-hmm. So I learned those, and I got caught in that web for many years. Mm-hmm. And when I popped my head out, I realized that there were so many beautiful things about the physicality of the practice and the breath work and some of those movement patterns and the detoxification and all of the things that are part of it, that I decided to take the religiosity, push it aside, and bring it to people in a palatable way in which their bodies and their minds could receive it and titrate and understand it without the religious pieces at all. Right. And so there's a philosophy, but that philosophy is very different than the physical practice. And I personally, and hopefully I won't get too much flack for this one, don't believe that you need to practice the 8 limbs to really practice yoga. And so it's one of the reasons why I call it stretching, because what I do is help people to feel better.
Right.
And how do I do it? I do it through different methodologies that include yoga, assisted stretching, all different types of really cool equipment and technology that I've learned from professional athletes and collegiate athletes. And that's what I bring to the table. And I've had people, literally, when I used to teach classes in a more public forum, I've had parents pull their kids out. And I'd ask them why. I said, what are you doing? And they said, well, you're going to teach my kids religion. I said, no, that's your job.
Exactly.
My job's to make your kid better at playing basketball, football, whatever it is, to make your kid more flexible and feel better in their own bodies. And part of what I do is to educate. And so I teach them about their bodies, to understand what's going on, to really be able to pinpoint what it is that's happening. And of course, that all has a mental as well as emotional component.
Absolutely.
So that's my long-winded answer to the religiosity behind yoga and why I don't promote it.
Right.
Because I don't think it's necessarily necessary. And we live in a Western world. We live in a world of Starbucks and Snapchat and Instagram. And that world that existed back then for those people is not, there's something called spiritual psychosis. It's real, where people become so entrenched in this practice of yoga that they lose touch with their family, their beings. And I have warned people. I've watched it happen.
And that doesn't just happen in that world.
No,
that also happens in the Christian world. And we have a term for it, or a phrase. It's becoming so heavenly minded, you're no earthly good.
Wow. I love that.
Yeah. So we all have our things that we take too far or interpret the wrong way.
Yep.
So that's what I want to start off with is whatever your philosophy or idea of yoga is, we want to look at it what you're presenting it as, which is a help for the body.
Right.
Because a majority of people do not move enough.
No.
A majority of people sit at a desk all day, every day.
Don't do anything.
Go home, have dinner, sit and watch TV for a few hours. And then if we're lucky, they might do something active on the weekends and hurt themselves.
Exactly.
So what we're trying to do and what I'm trying to do on this platform is give people other ways and other things to incorporate, because not everyone does want to go to a gym. Not everyone wants to go to a yoga class. And I totally get that.
Absolutely.
And that's why I like how you present this, because you do individual training. But you also, simply put, you just teach a philosophy of how the body can move properly in the right way, in the right time, to make your body healthy.
Absolutely.
That is the end game here.
Absolutely. And so I created about 2.5 years ago, I started to create a program, an online program, and it's called The Stretch Lady. And it's a series of 42 different videos, and they're blocked off in what I call the usual suspects, which are the parts of the body that commonly get hurt or challenged, and that I get all the questions about. And when I see somebody in person, I give them a full-on assessment. My first session always is an assessment and, frankly, an interview.
Yes.
I can't lie to you. I don't take every client.
I love it.
Not every client
is ready. Yep.
So they have to be ready. But the program that I do online has the assessment and the corrective exercises, both on a dynamic and static exercise standpoint, that can help to heal the body. And that program is far less expensive than seeing me.
Right.
So I wanted to put it out there because I got the same questions all the time. And after teaching,
it's like baking a cake, I say.
Yes.
It's the same story, just different flavor.
Right.
Different additives.
Right.
But it's a lot of the same things that you see as a practitioner.
And after seeing thousands and thousands of people and teaching in public forums and doing educational aspects of it and training people to do what I do, because I can do all of that and I do all of that, I was like, why not create an online platform that highlights this and enables everyone to do it?
And what I love about that, because in my practice, I see people at all different kind of starting points.
Yeah.
Some come to me, like I described earlier, not moving at all.
Yep.
Some come to me coming out of a very, bad sickness. Some are very shy. There's just tons of different starting points for everyone.
Yep.
And so that is one of the reasons I like what you do is there's no excuse. There's no excuse anymore that I can't afford a gym or I don't have time to go to a gym or whatever it could be, you provide an outlet and a platform that anyone can get started at.
Wherever they
love
are.
that. Wherever they are.
It doesn't
whatever
matter.
capacity, whatever restrictions they have, limitations they have, you can start them at that point.
Absolutely. And that's where they begin, and that's where that healing begins. So, common things that people come to me with are back pain, shoulder pain, hip pain, groin pain. All of these are solvable. And the other thing that's really important to understand, and part of the challenge I have with the industry, is that you can't be mobile if you're not stable.
Preach it, sister.
Oh, it's awful. So
Yes.
So many people go to a yoga practice and get so entrenched and ensconced in it that they think that they've got to practice 5 or 6 days a week. And that's what I was told.
Right.
I'm not going to lie to you.
Right.
Sandra, I've never been more sore or more injured than when I was doing only yoga 6 days a week.
Let me tell you a story because I am the type of person, I like to try everything, especially if I'm encouraging my clients to try things I like to try. And I'm not a huge yoga fan. I'm more of a workout, gym, classes, stuff like that. So, but I want to, and I know yoga is good for you to calm, be quiet. I like the hot tub for that, but that's just me.
I like the steamer.
So I did a yoga class, and the instructor said, and I almost took over the class because I was so irritated.
Yeah.
There was some ladies in there probably in their late 50s, early 60s, completely new to yoga, I could tell. And she was having us do some crazy poses that I wouldn't even do. And I'm an athletic, healthy person.
Right.
But I know my limitations and I should not be doing that.
Yes.
And she was trying to have these ladies do it.
No.
And her sentence, I can remember it was like it was yesterday. She said, if you haven't fallen in yoga at some point, you're doing it wrong.
Wow.
I'm like, wait. So
Wow.
you're setting people up to
For
fail?
failure.
Yeah, that's not appropriate.
So that's not part of yoga teacher training, by the way.
Exactly. So again, it goes
No.
back to make sure you're working with a professional
Yes.
that knows how to look at what you're doing and how you're moving to best instruct you to accomplish the goal, which is strength and stability.
So to that point, the challenge is that people on average will walk into a class and they will think that they need to be as good as the best person in the class. And if they're not, they're somehow bad. So I have injured myself trying to help someone else from injuring themselves. And that's when I stopped doing public practices. So when I go in and do any sort of workout for myself, I'm doing it for my body to create more stability. I happen to be hypermobile. It's why you won't see me doing my videos. I
Yes.
don't need them. I need stability.
Let's just pause right there. That is a huge, huge issue, and people don't understand. Hypermobility is a serious thing and a very common thing.
Yes.
And what I find in my practice, other practitioners that I know, people don't know until you know. So hypermobile people will gravitate to yoga
And what they're good
because
at.
it's easy for them. Because it's easy for them. They
Yes.
think I can do this.
Yeah.
And yoga will help me be stronger. But if you're holding static, long poses forever, you're continually decompressing and lengthening already weak and lax joints.
Exactly.
So caveat for a second and talk about that, how you as a practitioner, you'll see someone and you'll say, okay, wait, this is not for you. We need to do this instead. Talk about the hypermobility part.
So when I've worked with professional athletes, one of the questions I typically get is there such thing as too mobile or too flexible? And my answer is absolutely.
Yeah.
So when you're looking at the range of motion of a joint, you also have to look at what you're trying to accomplish with that joint. So if I'm looking at a lineman versus a quarterback, there's a whole different range of motion that they need.
Right.
So in alignment, I want to keep them stable. So if they say, I want more mobility in my shoulders, I'll say, great, but we don't need full range of motion. With the quarterback and more of the skilled positions, they're going to need a little bit more mobility. So working on those pieces, but again, keeping the strengthening part of it at the forefront is extremely important. So it's one of those things where somebody may have a goal. One of the funniest stories I have is of Gerald Wallace, who used to play for the Hornets. And the first time that he came to me, he asked me to get him into a split like Jean-Claude Van Damme. Now,
Goals.
right? But his hips were very immobile and his body and his position and what he was trying to accomplish. I looked at him and I said, off season, potentially, post-career, yes. But right now, we just need to get your hips to move better so that you can do all of the things that you like to do. And his nickname was Crash. So he would literally leave it all on the court.
Right.
He would dive. He would do all these things. And after working with me for several years, he had a lot more control over his body. So my goal is more... look at the person, look at the situation, look at what we're trying to accomplish and get there.
Yes.
Not look at the bendy person on the yoga video that's viral and try to get there. And that's one of the issues that I have with social media is that so many people are striving towards that hypermobility. And what it does is it hinders you and it weakens you.
Right.
And so when I found out that I was hypermobile, it took me many years and a lot of back pain. And unfortunately, several injuries to figure this out, I realized that I needed to do a ton of strength training. And I work with big athletes and I move them. I do assisted stretching. So that's part of it as well.
Yeah.
And when that happened, I became more stable in my body and I'm able to do more.
Yeah.
And so I've even had professional athletes ask me if I could train them off season 5 days a week, and I won't do it.
Correct.
And they get very mad at me.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I don't want you going back to your season weaker. And you talk about those long static holds. I actually don't even use static holds unless I'm trying to get up here.
Right.
If I want to get somebody into a particular mental state and they're having a challenge, making a decision, doing something really important in their life, holding them in a position for a long period of time so that they can focus and move their mind into that space is really what I use it for. They have personal trainers. They have athletic trainers. They have other people that can help them with the strengthening aspect of things. I'm there to help to make all of those joints move more fluidly so that they feel better in their bodies and they can compete and perform. And this goes the same for the CEOs that I work with, same with the person who's coming in who's never done mobility before. I work with runners. I work with all different types of populations, and they all have the same challenge. They just don't feel entirely comfortable in their bodies.
And I want to caveat for just a second to explain to the people that are listening. You said earlier about when you're hypermobile or weak, your back was hurting. And so I want to explain in a very short capacity the progress of instability, what happens. So if a joint is unstable, the first thing that's going to happen is a muscle around that area is going to start to lock down and get hypertonic and try to help stabilize that joint. When that's not enough, your brain will seek out another muscle structure, maybe on the front side of that joint, doing the opposite action of that other muscle that was trying to help, and it will start to lock down. And then you start to get a little more pain. Well, when your body and your brain senses that's still not enough stability, the next step in instability is forced joint closure. So that's when you get your lumbar spine compressing, the famous SI joint compression. That is a progression of instability, and that's what you're talking about.
Absolutely.
So not only are we mostly people are weak that sit at a desk all day or that aren't focusing on strength training. So they're starting off in a state of weakness, and the progression of their instability pattern may be different, but that's what you're talking about is you as the professional are looking for those markers.
Absolutely.
Where are you in that paradigm? So when someone comes to you, their goal may be, I want to be flexible. Well, no, you need to be strong. And one of the things I absolutely love about, because I know you personally, locally, I've seen you at the gym, you're a yoga practitioner that strength trains.
Exactly. Yeah.
That's hugely important.
Well,
hugely.
It's creating stability in the body. So if somebody comes to me, I tried to individualize, if I'm working with somebody one-on-one, I try to individualize what it is that they're trying to do with their body and then marry it with the mobility pieces that are going to help them to get there.
Right.
So that's the key to me. And that's part of the paradigm shift in I'm going to go and do yoga 5 or 6 days a week versus maybe doing a mobility practice almost on the daily that's promoting what it is you're trying to do. So it even gets so specific that I have a whole like lower body stretch that they can do before they go and train legs or before they run.
Right.
And I give people assignments based upon what it is that they're trying to receive as outcome.
Yeah.
And that's the difference. It's more prescriptive than it is a generalized approach.
Right.
And unfortunately, most people have the misnomer that they have to go to an hour and a half yoga class and perform crazy gymnastic stuff to get more mobile.
And that's not
the case.
Yeah. So let's differentiate mobility training and stretching, because there's a huge difference. When you say things, it's funny. I do the same thing. It's shop talk.
Yes,
I'll say things and I totally get what I'm talking about.
Yeah, and
someone in the industry are like, oh yeah, I gotcha. And people are like, huh?
Yeah,
I don't know what that means.
Yes.
So mobility training versus stretching. So stretching is what everyone does. People assume, or they think that they will get mobility if they stretch. You do not get mobility by stretching. You get mobility by stability.
Yes.
So you can stretch all day long, those tight muscles. Those tight muscles are there for a reason, because your joint isn't. If it's a chronically tight muscle, I just have tight hamstrings. No, you don't. Your brain does not want to be working that hard.
Exactly.
So we could continue on that for hours.
Yeah,
but
of course.
What you're talking more about in the training that you're talking about prescribing people is more mobility. So tell us what that looks like. Give us an example, because I know what you're saying.
Yeah, but other people might not.
Other people have no clue what they think of the same thing. Stretching, mobility, same thing.
So let's use the hamstring for a great example, because I get a lot of tight hamstrings.
Yes, so do I.
Yes. So you take a look at what's going on around it, just like you talked about. So a lot of times when a muscle is perceived as tight, it's actually weak.
Yes.
So, yeah.
And people
just
that are
remember
listening,
that.
you guys have no idea the knowledge that is coming across these microphones.
And here's the issue.
It can be tight and weak and tight and hypertonic.
Exactly.
That's our job to figure it out.
So when somebody comes to me with that, of course I want them to have relief.
Yes.
So what do? I actually test the muscle. So
what? You mean you don't just stretch every psoas? Not every psoas needs to be stretched?
No.
I don't know what to think.
No. And for those of you guys who are out there, the psoas is responsible for basically propelling that hip forward. So 9 times out of 10, if somebody says they have tight hips, you check the psoas first, which is this lovely fan-shaped muscle that's basically around your hip area. And there's a way to test it, which I do. And there's also a way to release it.
Yes.
But sometimes it doesn't need to be released.
Most of the time.
So,
Iliacus is the bad guy.
Yeah, exactly. So sorry, we're talking chop talk here, but we'll go back to we'll head back to the hamstring. So with the hamstring, sometimes it's the quad that's tight. So first thing to look at is the quadricep tight, because as we know, and I'll educate the listeners, the quadricep has 4 muscles and the hamstring has 3. So those 4 muscles are constantly pulling those 3. So first I take a look at what's going on with the quad, what's going on with the IT band, which runs along the side of the leg and could be stuck.
And stop foam rolling the IT band, side note.
Yeah, it just doesn't work. And then looking at those things, testing the hamstring, and typically it's weak. And how do I know that? I'm testing it.
Right.
And then understanding, do they need more strengthening on one side than the other? Most people are asymmetrical, especially in the muscular end of the spectrum. So do I figure out, okay, this right side's tighter or weaker than the left?
Right.
Having that conversation about what activities they're doing and having them become aware of how they walk, how they exercise, how they do
body
everything.
awareness.
And then helping them to self-correct. But then we look at the mobility side of things, and do they need dynamic or static stretching? So then here's the educational process, guys. They're not the same.
No.
So in a dynamic stretch, you're actually moving the joint and the muscle in the range of motion. And you can do that pre and post exercise. With a static hold, you can get release in the muscles, but you don't want to do that prior to let's say, activity or strength training.
Correct.
Because it can cause weakness.
Yes.
So with the hamstrings, I do both, depending on the situation. Some of them are some of the stretches that we're doing, the mobility work that we're doing is extremely passive. And people are like, I don't feel like I'm doing anything.
Yeah.
I'm like, really?
Wait till you walk around.
Right. And that's what I'll do is have them get up after one side.
Yep.
Or sometimes after both and say, okay, now try doing some of those activities that you want to do. So mobility is about utilizing the muscle and the joint in the way that it's intended. It's not necessarily making it flexible. That's why I'm not the flex lady.
Right.
Or the flexible lady.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because it's not about that. It's really about stretching. It's about mobility, but it's not about overstretching.
Right.
And that's part of the issue that you run into with hot yoga because it makes the joints too mobile. And it's part of the issue you have with some of these crazy gymnastic moves that you see on Instagram.
Right.
Not everyone should be putting their foot behind their head.
Right.
So I know that was really long-winded,
No,
and hope we hit on all the topics that we needed to on with regard to that. But that's like a huge piece of what I do is assessing from an individual standpoint. But my video series, you can do it yourself. Like I have all of my trade secrets, all of the testing that I do in there. Obviously, I can't be there to test the muscle,
Right.
and to test the joint, but it has validity on a much larger scale.
Well, I mean, with that, even videos that I do, other practitioners that I follow, and because every person is like a snowflake.
Exactly.
There are so many dynamics that come into play when it comes to movement patterns. I mean, one person has a twisted ankle, one person got shot in the shoulder. I mean, you can't plan for everything, but there is a good baseline to start with, especially when it just comes to bringing people's body awareness to the forefront and teaching them how to be body aware and where their body is in space and in relationship to gravity. So I think that's what you're saying. And I know what you're saying, trying to say, hey, it's not going to be for everybody, but for the big population with your videos, there's going to be something for everyone.
Absolutely.
There's going to be something everybody can start with.
Yeah, and my goal is to help people to become more comfortable with their own bodies. So if you can understand what's going on and you can help yourself, you're better off for everyone.
Yes.
To include your family, to include all the people around you. And you're not, when people are in pain, they're grumpy. Yeah. They're angry.
Yeah.
They're all of those, pain receptors are moving towards trying to feel better. If you know that there's something that you can do to make yourself feel better, then why are you not doing it? Yeah. And that's my philosophy. People who come to me and my clients are there to be well. They're there to be better.
Yeah.
And they're there to educate themselves. And my perfect client within 4 to 6 sessions can walk in the door and literally tell me exactly what's going on and why it happened. And then I know where to move from there.
Yeah, it's all about education.
All about it.
And so you brought up the next point I wanted to talk about. In my practice, so I'm a massage and bodywork practitioner. I got into the business to help people get out of pain. And we had this discussion earlier before we started. I learned very quickly that physical pain is rarely just physical pain. So I learned, and how I tell my clients and how I try to educate them and bring them to the awareness of this topic is I deal with the physical expression of mental, physical, and emotional stress and strain. So if I can help the physical, I can help the other things. But so tell me in your journey, because I know this is the same thing that happened to you, because if it didn't, you wouldn't be where you are now.
No.
So at what point in your practices, because there were several with strength training and yoga and mindfulness and all that, did it click with you that I can't just deal with the physical or I'm going to leave my clients with a third of what they need?
Immediately.
Immediately?
Yeah. So
because you felt it in your own body.
Right. And that's what I was just going to say.
Yeah.
So for me, when I came to the practice of teaching, I'd never really intended to teach or have a business in this. And if you would have asked me 20 years ago that I would have had this life, I would have told you were crazy and there was no way.
So you just got into it basically
because I loved it. Because I started practicing yoga in my late 20s and it changed my perception about life. I drank the Kool-Aid. And when I drank the Kool-Aid, it got in my veins. And what I realized was I had taught aerobics when I was in high school, and I had always loved the physical body and had this real battle internally with my weight, with my body image, and all of that. And when I came to the practice of yoga in its full form for me, it changed me so incredibly that all I wanted to do, Sandra, is change one person's life.
Yeah.
That was it. That was the goal.
Yeah.
So I'm like, okay, you know what? I'll go get my teacher training certification. I was going through a life transition because I was in the corporate world for 11 years prior, did corporate recruiting, headhunting, straight commission, straight sales, crazy.
Talk about a change.
Yes, it was nuts. And when I came to the realization that one life wasn't it, because I did that very quickly, I started teaching in a gym atmosphere, and in this gym atmosphere, there was a woman. Her name was Angelina, and she was being physically and mentally abused by her husband. And she shared that with me, and she said that my classes were the only time that she felt at home.
Wow.
And so she ended up teaching herself and moving back to Greece with her son.
Wow.
And when that happened, I stopped myself and I was like, wait a second. If you can do that, and that was only, I wasn't even trained and certified.
Right.
And that day they didn't care. Right. This was,
back in the day.
16 years ago.
Yeah. Yeah.
They're like, oh, you look like you could teach. You could teach. Go ahead. And I'm like, okay, great. I'll do it.
Right.
But I was led to start really delving in. And so I realized that there was a mental and emotional component that was being stoked by the fire of meditation. And when I say meditation, I know that's kind of woo-woo to all you folks listening. What I mean is
Not
just
the scary kind, just being quiet.
Focused concentration.
Being quiet.
Focused concentration. You're focusing your energy and your concentration on a fixed point, whatever that is. So if you're a visual learner, maybe it's a flickering flame. If you're a kinesthetic learner, maybe you have beads, or you have something you can touch, tactile. If you're an auditory learner, then maybe you're listening to listening to us, or Calm app or Headspace. But there is meditation for everyone, and that in and of itself changed my reality. And that's when I realized I needed to do both. And then ran into a former Stanley Cup winner who is a friend of mine and my husband's, who was doing a whole life coaching certification. And so a couple of years ago, I decided to go ahead and get certified in it. So now I can do that, and I have trainings and pieces that people can do, either self-assessment or I can do assessments for them, where you start to pick up on your personality. So now you can really hone in on all the different
got
pieces.
You there
so that's why I connected the two, but it took it being in my own body and my own heart and my own soul to really understand the interconnectedness of the mind and the body. And the interesting part, and I know you know this, but once the body unwinds, it seems like the mind unwinds too. And so sometimes you can have those moments of, what do I do with all of this?
Right.
And that's, in a lot of instances, like you, I cross-refer. There are times where acupuncture, massage, different types of counseling, all the different pieces come into play, because I can't do everything. And once somebody unearths those pieces, there are layers and layers inside of there. And if you don't deal with those layers, guess what? It can come back to you in the form of dis-ease.
Right. Yes.
And I'm trying to avoid that with my clients. So as things become unearthed.
Right. As they start to have symptoms.
So for me, it was a total connection from the beginning, like really understanding that everything was together.
Yeah. I think, what you're saying, and what people in our field and people that practice wellness of any sort, when you have been sick or in pain, and then you come through that journey to the other side, that is why we are so passionate about it. The sad part is most people spend years and years and years sick and in pain, either mentally, physically, and emotionally, usually all three.
Yes.
And they don't even know that their normal is not normal. So I think that's a lot of the passion that people see. And I don't know, people think we're weird because if we have time to read, we're reading anatomy books, or we're watching videos on like some new anatomy stuff, or learning
I'm getting trained and certified in something new.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. So it's exciting to us because we know we can be the catalyst for people that brings them from dis-ease into health. And that is the goal with all of this. And that you're saying cross-referring. So what I tell to my clients is try all the things.
Yes. Find out what works for you.
Find out what works for your nervous system and your body and your mind.
Yes.
Because it is different for everyone. I will never do cryotherapy. I don't care what you say.
Yeah. And that's the thing. So your nervous system.
I know it won't work for me. I know acupuncture won't work for me. I've had too many surgeries in children. I'm not going to work.
And that's the thing. You have to find what works for you. And you brought up a really interesting point and something that's been happening to me over the past couple of weeks. So sometimes people don't know what not feeling sore and not feeling challenged in their body feels like. So I had a client come to me, 12-year-old, been playing sports since the time he's been 4.
Wow.
And he came in, he didn't have any complaints. His dad was like, he's being recruited by an excellent school. We want to make sure we give him all the best that we can. And after working on him, his dad texted me and he said, I'm not really sure what happened, but my son's never felt so good in his own body. And he didn't even know what he felt like. And I had the same thing happen with an NFL player weeks prior, where he said, I've never felt like this. This is what like normal people feel like.
Yeah. And you don't know until you feel healthy.
And so that's part of the challenge is we don't know what we don't know, that unconscious incompetent.
Yeah.
And so once we become more comfortable and more whole in our bodies, feeling that sensation becomes the new normal.
Yeah. Now let's talk a little bit about some of the more serious sides of life. So, because people, like I said, I see people on every gamut of, and usually I've been working with some of my clients for 10 years.
Same.
So I've seen them at the high points and the low points.
Yeah.
And sometimes in life, bad stuff happens.
Yep.
Really bad stuff.
Yeah.
So when we talk about anxiety, depression, PTSD, all those things, I think some people would think movement could help that. How can movement help me overcome my PTSD? How could what is breathing practice? So I know we talked earlier about some examples of that. So tell the listeners some real world examples of people that you've worked with that you've helped through those things through movement.
So once you can connect into your body, and once you can really tap into that innate wisdom, things happen. Breathwork is one of the most amazing gifts you can give yourself. So it's the one thing we can't live without. We can live without food. We can live without water. But we can't live without breath.
Just try it. Don't.
Yeah, don't try it. Don't try that at home. But once the body fully breathes, once you can feel all of that connection and that connective tissue and everything happening, emotions can open up. So I have a particular student athlete that I've been working with now. We haven't seen each other that much as a new client and came to me with a particular challenge. He was having, when I heard what was happening, what is considered a panic attack, every single time he went to play. And this is his passion and his love, and he wants to go and play this sport in college. And he's not backing down.
Right.
And so
his body isn't cooperating.
Not at all. So he's been to every doctor on the planet. No diagnosis.
Right.
And I talked to him about post-traumatic stress disorder. And he had a situation in which he had been grabbed by the neck and his breath had been shut down in his sport. And he, every time he gets on the field, starts to cough and he leaves his body for a few minutes at a time, doesn't know what happens, and then has to re-enter. And so in that example, I taught him how to start breath work before he goes into the game. And then when he starts to feel like he's going to experience that, to do, and we're going to do it today, deep calming breath work using the entire, respiratory system to include the diaphragm and to connect and pull himself back into his body, somatic response to get him back. And he's been practicing it. And guess what? He's gotten less nauseous. He's had less times of disconnect. Because during these times of disconnect, he gets very aggressive and he can go out and do some pretty big damage on himself and other people.
Right.
It's almost like the Incredible Hulk.
Yeah.
Where you disassociate.
Yeah.
And so I've had situations like that. I've had a lot of people come to me with severe anxiety. And there is, so in yoga and stretching and all of this, there is something called vinyasa, which you'll hear the term, which is moving from pose to pose. When you move fluidly like that, there is something that happens in your body. It's like swimming, where everything's moving fluidly. And you can get this incredible endorphin rush. That right there is super healing. Now, you combine that with the breath. I work with a lot of corporate executives. They don't want to go to a yoga studio. They don't want to go to a gym.
Right.
They want to have private practice. And so with them, I will cue breath and movement at the same time. What does that do? Well, first of all, it takes them out of whatever mind space they're in because these people are highly successful.
Yeah.
Talk about people who've built Charlotte.
Yeah.
And they disconnect from all of that and they become one with their bodies. Once that happens, that stress response starts to lessen and you start to be able to connect at a much deeper level with your body. And then they feel better and they're actually feeling lighter and more connected to themselves.
Yeah.
So the anxiety can be caused by lots of different things, but our body, they call it issues in the tissues for a reason.
Yeah.
So body holds on to these things. And once we start to release it, it's pretty incredible the things that happen.
Yeah. And again, people don't know what they don't know.
No, they don't. They have no idea.
I think people are starting to get and understand they're not breathing well. I think that's kind of becoming a more popular topic, diaphragm breathing, that kind of thing. So
and it's much simpler than you. I'll show you. It's super simple.
We're going to do it today.
Yeah, we
actually.
are.
So if you're listening on the podcast, make sure you watch the YouTube video later as well. But breathing is huge. And breathing is most of the time where we need to start with people because they're not breathing right.
And what happens when we don't breathe? I personally have an example. So I suffered a concussion, what they'll call a TBI, traumatic brain injury, about 3 years ago. And I was released from the medical community because I was 85% in their opinion. 85% okay.
Don't get me started on concussions.
Yeah, so it's a whole other, I could talk about that for hours. And basically, I ended up going to a place called Carolina Healthspan, where I did a series of tests on my brain. But one of the things that they tested, and it's called biofeedback, is how I breathe. So they connected me to a machine. And what I didn't realize was I wasn't breathing properly. The trauma had affected my breath work. And instead of being challenged and flustered by it, I took the same attitude that my CEOs and professional athletes take, which is coach up.
Right.
Coach yourself.
Practice what you preach.
Yes. And
been there.
get tough on yourself, but be kind.
Yeah.
And I told them that I was going through 3 months of care. I said, at the end of 3 months, I want you to retest me. And I went from, I believe it was 14 breaths per minute, stress and anxieties at 16, down to 2.
Wow.
And that was just practicing every day, deep breathing.
Yes.
It's in a minute. It was crazy.
Yeah.
So the lungs are capable. They're like any organ, they're pliable. And so I'll teach you a technique today to help thicken the diaphragm, which is a muscle. It's going to get bigger and stronger. And it helps the brain. Imagine if I'm breathing 12 to 14 breaths, even 16 breaths per minute, how much oxygen am I really getting?
Right.
And I'm chest breathing. So I'm not fully oxygenating the lower lobes of my lungs. I'm stupid at that point. I tell people all the time, like my student athletes, like, you're going to be smarter if you breathe slower.
Right.
It's that simple. It's that simple.
So we have covered a lot.
Yes.
And I'm sure there's people listening that it's new information for them.
Of course.
So I would highly suggest that you contact the Stretch Lady.
Yes. Thank you.
For any of those questions.
Yep.
And that's pretty easy to find online, is the Stretch Lady on all platforms.
It's the Stretch Lady on all platforms, including the website. It's thestretchlady.com. It's that easy. And there's a place where they can even sign up for free videos so they can get it before they buy it and they can understand what they're getting into.
Awesome.
But I definitely highly suggest that they follow the breath work that we're going to do tonight. That's a great first step in anyone's life, is to learn, as crazy as it sounds, how to breathe. First thing we do, we get out of the womb.
So before we are going to go into the breath work, before we do that, is there anything else that you would like to leave our listeners with? Something they can incorporate into their mindset or into their daily practice tonight or in the morning that will help push them toward this space of full healing and happiness?
It's a great question. I believe that starting your day with gratitude is one of the best ways to start. So I love to, before I get up out of bed in the morning, do some breath work and think about 3 things that I'm grateful for. And I also love incorporating what I'd like to accomplish that day, how I'd like to feel that day. So if I want to feel joyful, if I want to feel peaceful, and starting to incorporate that is a meditative practice. And just even laying for 2 to 3 minutes and doing a little bit of breath work and some focus on gratitude and focus on how you want your day to unfold. I mean, it sounds corny and cheesy, but what you focus on becomes your reality.
Yeah.
And so if you say, hey, I want to feel joyful today, and you do all things with joy, that's going to happen. Just like if you say, you know, if your alarm doesn't go off and you start feeling miserable.
The world stinks and my day's going to be awful.
That's when you spill your coffee all over your clothes. And that's when, you know, your kids go cuckoo. And the other thing that I wanted to talk about quickly is the myth of balance. So
doesn't exist.
It really doesn't. And so living each moment, each day in the best way for you, even if you're going through challenges.
Right.
Don't try to think that everything's going to be perfect at some point or wait for that what if. Balance really doesn't exist. It's about creating the best life that we can. And we both know as practitioners that we get super busy.
Right.
Thank goodness. I'm so grateful.
Yes.
But there are times that I have to take pregnant pauses where I will literally carve out hours of my day and not take clients just to give myself mental health.
Right.
That's my form of balance. I don't believe that I can have the 4-day work week or the 4-hour or whatever it is. Like, it just doesn't exist.
Right.
But creating that balance for me, and every individual has that for themselves. It's not this grandiose, crazy plan. It's what is it for you?
Right.
How is it that you can create that in your life? So I just wanted to debunk that, because I get that question a lot. Like, oh, how do you stay balanced?
There isn't. It's a rhythm.
It's a rhythm.
It's a rhythm.
It's a rhythm,
and it
for
changes
sure.
daily. So
sometimes moment by moment.
Moment by moment, and being intentional about how you start. Like you said, first thing in the morning. I have an awake routine that I take people through to start your day off more stable in your pelvis. I mean, and
Love
just,
it.
like you said, starting with intention for what you want. And the way you speak to yourself is what you're going to get.
Absolutely.
So,
absolutely.
We are now going to move into some breath work. So we're going to leave the listeners and the viewers with an example of what you would do with a client.
Yep.
The first thing we'll do is a calming breath exercise.
Yep.
And then the next one we'll do will be an energizing.
Yes.
Is that correct?
Yes.
Is the way to say it?
Yeah, we'll leave them hyped
We'll
up.
leave them hyped up and ready for their day.
Awesome.
So shoot.
If you're doing the calming breath work, you can either do it seated or lying down. And I like doing aspects of kinesthetic awareness, so touching the body, understanding that it's all interconnected. So you can take one hand and put it over your heart area and another over your belly, because these are the areas you want to breathe into. And then you can close your eyes and allow your breath to start to move very slowly in through the nostrils. And if you have any sort of challenges with the nasal passages, then feel free to breathe through the mouth. The nose breathing just helps to calm the central nervous system down. And what you're going to do is just take a nice deep breath into the chest and into the belly. So you let the belly expand like a big belly, like what we're not taught to do. Just let it relax. And then exhale nice and slowly through the belly and through the chest. And you do that for maybe 5 to 10 breaths, and you're focusing your energy on bringing the belly and chest to rise and then releasing those. What you're actually doing is you're building up the diaphragm. So if you're doing this lying down, you can bend your knees and put your legs over an ottoman, which is the way I like to teach it in my office. And you can put a very light weight, a pillow, or even like a 5-pound weight on your belly, and you push the belly out and back in. So this is one that's calming for the central nervous system. And you try to breathe as deeply as you can. And you let all the breath come in, and then you squeeze all the breath out. So that's more of a calming breath. You just want to take at least, I'm going to say 20 to 30 seconds to do that. And it really just helps you to kind of settle in, especially with the holidays coming up. Yes.
A little caveat real quick. I just can't help myself.
Sure. Go for it.
My women that have had C-sections.
Yes.
C-section scars. There is a huge disassociation with that part of their body.
Yep.
And the tactile, the touch is very important for them in their healing to come back to themselves and back to their body, back to associating with it and communicating with it. So little side note for all my ladies that have had C-sections that have chronic back pain, the scar is huge. So let's move into the energizing breath.
So this one's a little different. So this one, I'm going to kind of push myself away from the microphone because I don't necessarily want anybody to hear me do what I'm doing.
Oh, it's going to be a loud one?
Yeah, it's kind of loud.
Okay, maybe a little
so we'll move it back. So basically what you're going to do with this one, and hopefully you all can still hear me from here, I'll try to project my voice, is you're going to pretend that you are blowing out a candle.
Okay.
Very forcefully.
Okay.
So I'm going to close my eyes because I like to get into my body. This is, so breath work can be heating or cooling. This is heating. So some people use this instead of a cup of coffee. Personally, it hasn't worked for me that well, but it does bring my energy up.
Yes.
And energy.
And a little tweak that we need in the middle of the day. That's what we're looking for.
Exactly. So you take a nice deep inhale. And then you pretend that either you're blowing out a candle or you're telling a very, very annoying person to be quiet, very forcefully. Yeah. So it's like this. Shh, 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 shh. So what you're doing when you're doing that is you're actually, as crazy as this is, you're doing abdominal work.
Yes.
So you're snapping your belly in, up, and back. So the key is to let your belly relax and then snap it back while you're doing it. So here's how it looks. You want to do at least 10 to 15 rounds to start, so you do them quickly. So you can do it with me if you want to. You can step
I'll just watch.
All right, sounds good. It's a little crazy looking. I'm not going to lie to you. Just take a nice deep breath. I like to put my hand on my belly so I can feel it snap. So at the end of it, you let all the air out.
Yes. I can imagine that is energizing. You're like pumped. Yeah.
Everything's flowing.
That is awesome.
So that's the energy breath that,
wow.
And again, some people use it in place of caffeine.
Yeah.
You can do 50 rounds. You can do as much as you want. The only contraindication to this is if you do have heart problems. Listeners, don't do it.
Right.
It's just very, very, very invigorating. But it definitely brings what we call in the yoga world prana, which is life force, into the body, which is really cool.
Be careful with that.
Yes, be careful with that breath.
Powerful.
It is powerful, but it's
and
awesome.
This is just a little sampling of what you would do with someone and the techniques that you have in your tool belt of being able to help people.
Yes.
And I love every part of it.
Thank you. I appreciate that very much.
So any last words, any final thoughts? Just move, right? That would be
move.
Let's
just
move.
Move your joints, move your body, feel good in your body.
Yeah.
Don't be afraid to try new things. Definitely check out the Stretch Lady. Check out the videos. The free stuff is really great and it will help you. It's stuff you can do every single day and implement every day. And they're short videos. None of them are longer than like 6 minutes. I mean, we all have short attention spans. So you can do a lot in 6 minutes.
Yeah. I mean, that's why we're here, and that's why we take the time to do this, because we know, like I said, we felt what it's like to be hurting, in pain, and sick.
Yes.
And we know what we have done to get out of that. And we're trying to give that to you. So take the time to check out the website, check out the videos. And like I tell my clients, if you do one thing, pick out one of them and incorporate one new thing into your life this week. that will be a huge step forward in your overall wellness.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much for being with me today.
Thank you for having me.
Great information, and
Thank
it's
you.
going to be a life changer for some people if they'll implement the things that we talked about.
It doesn't take a lot of time or a lot of effort or a lot of energy, but the response in your body and the healing that you can get from it is absolutely astronomical.
Absolutely. And on that note, on astronomical healing, we will end this episode. Thank you so much for staying along with us on this longer podcast. I hope you will find some information that will be beneficial for you in your journey and your relentlessness every day, with the goal to be truly healthy and truly happy. See you next time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Awesome.